Welcome to Sci-Fi Screen. Subscribe for thrilling stories, epic worlds, and the future brought to life. The staging ground smelled of ozone and burnt metal. Captain Elena Voss pressed her palm against the med-tent's polymer wall, watching through the translucent fabric as the Kethran warriors moved through their evening ritual, synchronized display of bared teeth and guttural harmonics that made her molars ache. They were magnificent and terrifying. 7 feet of corded muscle wrapped in dark fur that shifted between slate and obsidian, with eyes like molten copper that tracked movement with predatory precision. 3 months into this alliance against the swarm, and she still caught herself calculating escape routes whenever one looked directly at her. The emergency call had come through during the Twilight Watch. Skirmish at the northern perimeter. Casualties: 2 human soldiers, 1 Kethran scout, and something the translator AI kept rendering as youth ward, before giving up entirely. Elena had volunteered before command finished the briefing. Someone had to retrieve the bodies, and the Kethran didn't trust human medics near their fallen not until the death songs were complete. But a civilian xenobiologist with medical training, she occupied a grey space in their protocols. Useful. The crash site was worse than reported. The swarm had used acid spitters this time, melting through armor plating like tissue paper. Elena worked quickly, tagging human remains for recovery, trying not to think about Private Martinez's daughter, who drew pictures of dinosaurs and had just turned 6. The Kethran scout lay 30 meters away, massive even in death, his fur matted with the bioluminescent blue that meant honorable combat. She placed the territorial marker flag beside him as protocol demanded, then heard it a sound that didn't belong. A whimper, high and broken, coming from inside the ruined transport. The cub was wedged beneath a collapsed bulkhead, no larger than a terrier, its fur still downy and grey. One hind leg bent wrong, blood red, not blue-pulled beneath it. Elena's hands moved before her brain caught up, activating the plasma torch on her multi-tool, cutting through twisted metal. The cub's eyes snapped open, copper ringed with gold, pupils blown wide with pain and terror. It tried to snarl, revealing milk teeth, but the sound dissolved into a keen that stabbed straight through her chest. "I know," she whispered, voice steady, despite the tremor in her fingers. "I know, it hurts, but I've got you." She wrapped it in her thermal blanket, felt its rapid heartbeat against her ribs like a trapped bird. Its claws already sharp dug through her jacket, but she didn't let go. Bringing it back to camp triggered an immediate diplomatic incident. The Kethran's second commander, a scarred female named Rethkis, who spoke perfect clipped English, blocked the med-tent entrance with her body. "You overstep, human. The young one belongs to the clan." Elena shifted the cub's weight, careful of its injured leg. "The young one will die if I don't stabilize the fracture. After that, he's yours." Rethkis's ears flattened, a gesture Elena had learned meant complex emotion anger. Yes, but also something like grief or shame. It not he, not until the naming right. "And you presume we cannot care for our own?" The words were acid. Elena met those copper eyes and didn't flinch. "I presume you wanted to live. That's all." The standoff lasted 3 heartbeats before Rethkis stepped aside, a low rumble vibrating through her chest that might have been warning or acquiescence. The fracture repair took 90 minutes. Kethran physiology was fascinatingly alien. Hollow bones for speed, dual hearts, a metabolism that could shift between endothermic and ectothermic based on threat level. The cub remained conscious throughout, tracking her movements with unsettling intelligence. She talked constantly, narrating every step, the way she used to when helping her sister's kids with scraped knees. "This is the bone knitter. Feels weird, kind of tingly. You're doing so good, almost done." When she finished, the cub's breathing had steadied, and it hadn't tried to bite her once. She set up a recovery nest in the corner of her quarter's heated blanket. Water dish, protein rations broken into kebab-appropriate pieces. Anne told herself she'd hand it over to the Kethran nursery handlers in the morning. That was the plan. Reasonable, professional. The cub had other ideas. It refused food from anyone else, hissed and spat when Rethkis attempted contact. By the 3rd day, command stopped suggesting she transfer care, and the Kethran stopped visiting. Elena fell into an exhausted rhythm, monitoring the coalition's xenobiology reports during her duty shift, then returning to her quarters to feed a creature that watched her with unsettling focus while she worked through physical therapy exercises for its leg. She named it Ash, privately, after the color of its fur. Kethran didn't use names for their young until they survived their first season practical, given mortality rates, but Elena couldn't keep thinking of something this alive as it. Ash started following her. Short distances at first, limping determinedly in her wake. Then everywhere to the mess hall, the comm station, the morning briefings, where human officers pretended not to stare, and Kethran warriors radiated disapproval in waves of infrared heat her scanner could actually measure. The first time Ash fell asleep on her was an accident. Elena had been reviewing supply manifests on her bunk, and the cub had been curled against her thigh, a warm weight she'd stopped noticing. She woke at 0300 to find Ash sprawled across her chest, paws tucked under its chin, purring. Actually purring a sound she'd never heard a Kethran make. Its heartbeat synced oddly with hers. Loob-dub-loob, loob-dub-loob. A polyrhythm that should have been unsettling, but instead felt oddly right. She didn't move, barely breathed, afraid of breaking whatever spell had convinced this apex predator's offspring that she was safe. When dawn crept through the tent, seams Ash yawned, displaying a mouth full of sharpening teeth, then licked her jaw with a tongue like sandpaper, before hopping down to demand breakfast. It became habit. Ash would wait until Elena settled in for the night, then leap up with increasing confidence, kneading biscuits into her shoulder before collapsing into sleep. Elena stopped fighting it. There were worse problems than a trusting alien curled against her heart, like the swarm's new hive ship that long-range scans had detected building something massive in the asteroid belt, or the supply convoy that had gone silent 3 days ago, or the fact that half the human contingent was developing stress fractures from trying to match Kethran patrol schedules. She let herself have this one small, warm thing that needed her and didn't care about politics. She didn't know anyone was watching until the night the Alpha arrived. Elena had been teaching Ash to retrieve mostly to burn off energy, partly because watching a predator cub fetch a stress ball was objectively hilarious. She'd just flopped back onto her bunk, laughing, when Ash climbed up and immediately face-planted into her sternum, snoring within seconds. Elena was stroking the soft fur behind its ears, humming something her grandmother used to sing. When the tent flap opened without warning, she froze. Commander Varkesh filled the entrance, the Alpha himself, massive even by Kethran standards, his fur so black it seemed to absorb light. Scars tracked across his muzzle in patterns that told stories of combat she couldn't read. His eyes ancient, amber, impossibly intelligent, fixed on Ash's sleeping form, and his ears went flat. Not anger, something else, something that looked almost like shock. How long has the young one done this? His voice was resonant, each word precisely formed. Elena's hand stilled on Ash's back. 2 weeks. Commander, I know it's irregular. The word was flat. Varkesh moved into the tent with that liquid grace large predators possessed, coming close enough that she could smell copper and ozone, something wild that her hindbrain screamed was dangerous. He studied Ash, then her, with an intensity that felt invasive. We do not sleep with exposing our throats, not our mates, not our clutch siblings, certainly not our young. Sleep is vulnerability. The young one has placed its kill strike point against yours. And you, ... double quotes. He tilted his head, a gesture achingly familiar because Ash did the same thing when puzzled. You permit this, regularly. Elena felt defensive, walls snap up. Ash is a baby. Ash. The name clearly meant something in his language. His ears pricked forward. You have named it. Before the rites. I had to call it something. Her voice came out harder than intended. And yes, I let it sleep here. It's comforting, for both of us. The words sounded absurd, spoken aloud to a warrior who'd personally killed 83 swarm soldiers. She'd seen the count, displayed in bioluminescent scars across his shoulder. Varkesh was silent for long enough that she thought she'd caused some irreparable diplomatic breach. Then he made a sound, low and complicated, that the translator gave up on entirely. Even we do not trust that deeply. The words were quiet, almost wondering. Our bonded pairs sleep back to back, our young in guarded creches. You bare your throat to teeth and call it comfort. You are ... double quotes another untranslatable sound. His gaze shifted to her face, and she saw something that looked unsettlingly like respect. Your species is either the bravest or most foolish we have encountered. I have not decided which. The conversation rippled through the camp like a dropped stone. Suddenly, Elena found herself watched constantly. Kethran warriors would pause mid-stride to observe Ash trailing in her wake. Rethkes appeared at the med tent with questions that felt like tests. How did humans choose caregivers for their young? Did humans truly form bonds with beings outside their genetic line? Could trust exist without hierarchical dominance? Elena answered honestly, growing increasingly confused, until Lieutenant Park pulled her aside and explained, in hushed tones, that she'd accidentally stumbled into demonstrating something that challenged the fundamental Kethran understanding of pack dynamics. They were a species forged by a brutal homeworld where showing vulnerability meant death. Affection was transactional, loyalty earned through strength displays. The idea that trust could be freely given, that care didn't require reciprocal capacity for violence, it was revolutionary, threatening, impossible to ignore. The attack came during the changing of the guard, when both species were at their weakest. The swarm had adapted, learned their patrol rotations, and sent shriekers to disable communications before the main force hit. Elena was cataloging medical supplies when the alarms screamed. She ran, not away but toward her quarters, because Ash was there, alone, and her brain had stopped calculating survival odds weeks ago where the cub was concerned. The tent was shredded, 3 swarm drones inside, their segmented bodies glistening with acid. Ash was backed into a corner, baby snarls ripping from its throat, trying so hard to be threatening. Elena grabbed the plasma torch from her belt and became something she didn't recognize, screaming, slashing thing that put herself between teeth and what she loved. She felt claws rake her shoulder, smelled burning flesh that was probably hers, then a sound like thunder as something massive slammed into the tent from outside. Varkesh killed the first drone with his bare hands, ripping through chitin like paper. Rethkes took the second, her jaws crushing its neural cluster before it could spit acid. The third died too concentrated fire from the human rapid response team. But Elena didn't see Itchy was on her knees, hands checking Ash for wounds, whispering, "Okay, you're okay, I've got you," over and over like a prayer. Ash was keening, high and distressed, trying to climb inside her jacket. She gathered it close despite the pain radiating from her shoulder, and looked up to find Varkesh watching again. His fur was matted with swarm ichor, his lips pulled back from teeth that could shear through bone, but his expression was soft, wasn't the right word. Knowing, maybe, sad. "It would have died for you," he said quietly. "Already it understands pack befs. You have taught it this." Elena shook her head. "I didn't teach anything. I just loved it." The words sounded strange in his growling accent. "Without condition, without requiring proof of worth. This is your species' madness and your strength." He crouched, bringing his massive head level with hers, close enough that Ash reached out with one paw to touch his scarred muzzle. Something passed between them, some chemical or psychic signal Elena couldn't detect. Varkesh's eyes widened fractionally. "Impossible," he breathed. "The young one Ash carries the leadership gene, latent but unmistakable. In 10 seasons, it could challenge for alpha status. But it has imprinted on you." His gaze met hers, fierce and complicated. "You have raised the future of my people to believe that throats can be bared, that trust is strength. This will change us. Has already begun changing us." The aftermath was chaos and paperwork, medical reports, and restructured alliance terms. Elena's shoulder required 3 surgeries and left scars that pulled when the weather changed. Ash stayed with her through it all, growing larger weekly, its baby fat hardening into adolescent muscle. The Kethran began sending their newly orphaned young to human caregivers, tentatively at first, then with increasing frequency. Something fundamental had shifted. Warriors started partnering with human soldiers, not just alongside but with genuine trust. Rethkes told her, weeks later during one of their increasingly frequent conversations, that the clan mothers were teaching young ones a new phrase, bare throat trust, meaning the human way, the highest compliment they could give. Elena stood on the observation deck 6 months after the attack, watching the joint forces prepare for the push against the swarm hive ship. Ash leaned against her leg, now tall enough to reach her waist, wearing the ceremonial collar that marked it as named her right, performed 3 seasons early, because Varkesh had declared it ready. The cub that had slept on her chest was becoming something magnificent and deadly, but it still pressed close when thunder rolled. Still brought her kills now, thankfully, in the form of requisitioned rations, rather than actual corpses, still looked at her with absolute trust. Varkesh joined her at the viewport, his presence no longer triggering her fight-or-flight response. "We will win this war," he said, watching the ships align, "not because of superior weapons or tactics, because your people showed us that survival and compassion are not opposed forces, that the strongest warrior is the one who can bare their throat and still fight." He glanced down at her, then at Ash. "The swarm cannot comprehend this. It makes us unpredictable, terrifying." Elena scratched behind Ash's ears, felt it lean into the touch with a rumbling purr that vibrated through her bones. "We're just doing what feels right." "Yes," Varkish agreed, something like amusement in his tone. "That is precisely what terrifies them." Beyond the viewport, human and Kethran ships moved in perfect synchronization, a dance of trust that would have been impossible a year ago. Somewhere in the darkness, the swarm waited with its cold efficiency and pitiless logic. But here, in this fragile alliance built on one woman's inability to let a frightened child suffer alone, was something the universe hadn't accounted for. Hope, fierce and defiant, sleeping on the chest of humanity and dreaming of tomorrow.